Okay, sorry about that. Had a little bit of technical difficulties. Let's press on. So we left off here, and we're talking about euphemisms and dysphemisms, and these are examples of emotive meaning. Language that isn't neutral, it has this emotive element to it. So here we have a bunch of euphemisms and dysphemisms for dead or died. So think about all the nice ways and the not so nice ways of saying that someone has died. So what might you say at a funeral, right? So that would be the time where you would want to be solemn and not rude and polite. And so you might say, the person passed away, passed on, they have gone to heaven, they passed, they've left us, they're in heaven, they're at rest, they've departed, right? Dearly departed. They're no longer with us. They've met their maker. They're with God at peace, slipped away. They're sleeping. So many ways to say it nicely. Eternal rest. And then there are the not so nice ways. See if you can find those. You can pause the video. They've croaked, popped his clogs, kicked the bucket, bit the dust, dead as a doornail, brown bread. I don't even know that one. They've left the building. They've gone upstairs. That one's kind of sort of neutral. Pushing up daisies, 6 feet. That makes me think of 6 feet under. Dead as a dodo. They're 6 feet under. They bought the farm. Lost the battle. They're taking a dirt nap. Kicked the bucket. If I didn't say that, might have said that already. Fell off the perch. They've stopped breathing. Right? That's like a very technical way. They've gone fishing. Well, that's kind of, some of these you can take them both ways. Yeah. So it just goes on and on and on. But this really captures emotive meaning just for died or dead. You can see it both ways. Euphemisms, dysphemisms. Okay, we'll transition now away from emotive meaning, and we're going to talk about vagueness and ambiguity. Another important concept when it comes to the relationship of logic and language. So we're focusing on meaning, and logic is concerned with only cognitive meaning. Logic and reason don't have much to say about emotive meaning, right? That's what, I mean, it has its role in our psychology, of course, and that is more the domain of the humanities and the arts and poets, etc., who are experts in conveying emotive meaning, literature, film, television, etc. But what about when meaning is defective? Well, cognitive meaning can be defective if it's vague or ambiguous. So that means there's a problem where you're trying to convey information, but sometimes you try and you fail. And sometimes you might intentionally try to be vague or ambiguous. You might be defective on purpose. Here's another example from The Office. So Pam, who is the receptionist, at least at the beginning of the show, she is in charge of setting up a new photocopier. And Kevin, who's in accounting, so he's here, he's excited for it to be done. And so he goes up to Pam and it's kind of like, you're setting it up. When's it going to be done? And she says, soon. Well, soon could mean anything. Soon is really vague. Pam, and she says, when will the new copier be ready? I'm working on it, Kev. You said it would be ready by today, and it is today. So, by the way, today is vague because today could mean any part of the day. So that's not very precise. Pam says, it'll be ready soon. Soon can mean anything. I mean, Kevin's not totally wrong there. Soon could be 3 weeks. And Pam's like, is that what soon means to you? Sometimes. I love this is where the writing is good. It's funny. Then come back soon. Like go away but you can come back soon, but if soon is 3 weeks, that sounds good. Soon is vague. It's not clear what it means. It could mean all sorts of different things, a whole range with varying degrees. That's what vagueness is. A word, a phrase, a sentence, it's vague when its meaning, it's unclear. It's not specific enough. It's not precise enough. It allows for this continuous range of interpretations. Often it leaves us asking the question, how blank? It's going to be done soon. How soon? Right? My uncle is tall. How tall? It's going to be windy or hot today. How windy? How hot? These are all vague terms. I mentioned tall and hot. Bald. My grandfather is bald. How bald? Like completely bald, like balding. She or he's attractive. How attractive? Like a 10 out of 10, like supermodel attractive, kind of for in a certain domain. I'm young. I'm still young. Well, what is young? It's young. Like if you're 30, are you young? To a 50-year-old, yes. You 27, are you young? To a 19-year-old, maybe not. If you are 19, are you young? A lot of people would say yes. To a 7-year-old, I'd say no. So it's relative, and there's this range. Old, how old? And notice you can get more and more precise, and there often isn't a limit to this precision. How old's your dad? Oh, my dad is 52. Oh, yeah. Your dad's young. My dad's old. Well, how old? Well, he's 70. He's in his 70s. Well, exactly. Well, that's the whole range. What do you mean? So, like, be more specific. He's in his late 70s. Be more specific. He's 78. Be more specific. He's 78 and 4 months. Be more specific. He's 78, 4 months and 2 weeks. Be more specific. He's 78, 4 months, 2 weeks, 3 days. You can keep going. 3 days, 3.2 days, 3 days and 3 hours, 3 days. I'm forgetting what I said, 2 or 3 hours and however many minutes. And there's no end to how precise you can be. So the point isn't to completely eliminate vagueness. I'll say that again. The point is not always to completely eliminate vagueness. It might be impossible to completely eliminate it. We just want to be able to communicate in a way that is precise enough. So we want to be sufficiently clear, sufficiently precise. I had a student I emailed and said, hey, I'm turning in grades soon, and I noticed you did all the exams, you showed up in class, but you're missing this paper, and that's like a huge chunk of your grade. I'll be nice and I'll still accept it, but I'm turning in grades soon, so you gotta, and I said soon, which is funny, but you gotta get it to me ASAP, so as soon as possible. So that's a little bit more clear. And the student wrote back and said, my paper will be done soon. And again, I'm like, Kevin here, I'm like, well, soon can mean anything. If soon means 3 weeks, you're going to end up with a D in the class or whatever it's going to be. You see vagueness in the grocery store, on Amazon. Think about products that are reduced fat. That's vague. Let's say a company sells cookies, which have a lot of fat, and people are a little bit more health conscious. Each decade that goes by, and so cookie sales are down, and so they want to do something about it. And so they're like, well, maybe we'll put a little bit less fat in the recipe. They can't get rid of all of it because then a cookie wouldn't be a cookie, it'd be terrible, right? So then they put big letters on the package, reduce fat. This will sell. So it's like you eat a cookie and it's still not super unhealthy. But reduced fat is not very precise. I mean, they could go, let's say it has 20 grams of fat per serving, and they crank it down to 19 grams of fat. They go from 20 to 19. Is it reduced fat? Technically, yes, but that's pretty misleading to put like big letters, reduced fat. Yeah, I used to think that 2% with milk. I used to think 2% and 1% milk was like, wow, that is way healthier than regular milk, than whole milk. Because, I remember seeing this, when I was 5, 6, 7, 8. I used to think like, oh, it has 2% or 1% of the normal amount of fat, right? So like that's crazy. That'd be taking out 98 or 99% of the fat. So it was 100 grams of fat, which is a crazy amount per serving, but whatever, just for simplicity's sake, there are 100 grams of fat per serving in milk. And so that's regular milk. And then you get the 2% or the 1%, and that only has 2% or 1% of the 100 grams. Then instead of 100 grams per serving, it would be 2 grams or 1 gram. You're like, wow, and it still tastes pretty good. But then I learned, as some of you I might blow your minds right now, or I don't know if anybody drinks milk anymore, but whole milk, regular milk, is 4% fat usually. It's my understanding. So it's not reducing it 98% or 99%. It is a reduction of 50% or 75%, that's still pretty darn good, but it was misleading. Reduced fat milk, that was misleading. You see this all the time. Sometimes things are like on sale, like it's a legit sale, like something's like half off, and it might be like a limited time thing, and it might be like a Cyber Monday or Black Friday, and that can be a legit good deal. But a lot of times you'll see the half off in the huge font, and then in front of it, the qualifier in small little fine print says up to. And this up to, oh my gosh, that is a game changer. Let's say there's something that's $100. If it's half off, it's $50. That's it. There's no vagueness there. That's very precise. But up to half off, it's the same thing. If it's $1, if it is one reduction of 1% in price, so it's $99 instead of $100, you could argue that's still up to half off. So it's like there's a bunch of items in the store, and the ones that are on sale the most are half off, and then there are some that are on sale that might be 40% off or 30% off or 10% off, right? So maybe everything in the store up to half off. You're like, wow. But what if one thing or 5% of the items in the store, those are half off, and then the vast majority are only 10% off? So our mind gravitates toward the half off, and so we kind of just assume that everything is half off, or most things are half off, and it doesn't have to be that way. So vagueness is tricky. That's why this course is kind of cool. It helps you be a better citizen, consumer, has real life implications, which is cool, especially for philosophy. So that's vagueness. Ambiguity. A lot of people mix these concepts up. They say vague, ambiguous, those are synonyms, right? Well, at least for our course, they're not. A word, a phrase, sentence, language is ambiguous when it has multiple meanings, multiple discrete, like different meanings, discrete meanings, and it's not clear which is intended. So, for example, astronaut takes blame for gas in spacecraft. There's 2 ways to read this. This sentence is ambiguous. Was there like a fuel leak? Like, I don't know, whatever fuel they use in a spacecraft. They have rocket fuel, I guess, part of it, but they might have other kinds of fuel. And that's what the gas might be. Or, the funny meaning, like an astronaut flatulence, past wind, past gas in the, in a closed container. It's like being in an elevator. Someone lets one loose. That's the euphemism, by the way. That's another meaning. So when there's 2 different ways to read a word or a sentence, like in vagueness, you might say, well, aren't there like also two ways, multiple ways? But the difference is vagueness comes on a spectrum. There's this range of interpretations, and it just something you want to get clearer and clearer and clearer. Vagueness comes in degrees. Ambiguity is all or nothing. There's either two different ways to read a word or sentence or not. Something's ambiguous or it's not. Two sisters reunited after 18 years at checkout counter. So there's two ways to read this. One is probably the proper way is that there's these sisters, they haven't seen each other in 18 years, and then maybe they run into each other at a grocery store. They're reunited. Another one is that they maybe there's two checkout counters and they have been like chained to them, and they've each, you know, like, or maybe one of them or maybe both of them have spent 18 years at this checkout counter and then they're reunited. You know, it's less likely, but that's a way to read this. Ooh, nurses are paid more than doctors. Nurses are paid more than doctors. So when you first hear that, you're probably like, that can't be true. Come on, doctors make more. Nurses, they're the ones that kind of help out with doctors. You know, like there's even, you know, like doctor assistants. You know, that would be like a promotion for many nurses, or like a nurse practitioner and like a physician's assistant. Like those are very similar schooling for that. It's my understanding. So, you know, there's more schooling, there's fewer, there's more expertise, there's more stress, there's more responsibility for the doctors. So it just makes sense that the doctors would make more. What if I told you that this sentence is ambiguous and there's one way to read it that it's actually true? You can pause the video and think about it. If you think about nurses, not like the average nurse, but nurses as a group collectively, like if you pooled all the salaries of all the nurses in the world and you took all the salaries of all the doctors in the world and you had it on two scales and you weighed them, the nurses' salaries pooled together collectively might outweigh the doctors simply because of the sheer number of nurses. You know, it might be 10-1 nurses to doctors. The ratio might be 20-1. I don't know. And even if they only make a quarter or a third, if it's 10-1, that salary is going to outweigh the doctors. So it turns out that there's an ambiguity here, and it has to do with these words, nurses and doctors. These refer to groups. And so there's a special kind of ambiguity that's called grouping ambiguity. It's when there's at least two ways to read the meaning of a group. Do you mean this group individually or like on average? If so, then this is probably false, right? The average nurse is not paid more than average doctor, presumably. Or do you mean the group collectively? That is a different way to read it. That can be legitimate. Let's move on. She saw the farmer with glasses. She saw the farmer with glasses. There's multiple ways to read this. How are you reading it? What are you picturing? Well, here's one way. A farmer is wearing eyeglasses, and this person saw a farmer wearing eyeglasses. What's another way to read this? Well, instead of eyeglasses, maybe it's like a drinking glass. Like I have one right here. Maybe the farmer's holding a drinking glass. That's another way to read this. Is that it? There are more. Maybe the farmer doesn't have eyeglasses or drinking glasses. It's the person who saw the farmer. Maybe she saw the farmer with, you know, like through her eyeglasses. And I guess if you want to like put like the Coke bottle thing, she saw the farmer. This is a little bit of a stretch, you know, kind of like with her Coke bottle eyeglasses. I guess they're still kind of eyeglasses. So at least three ways to read this. But by the way, the word glasses just by itself is ambiguous. Do we mean eyeglasses or drinking glasses? That kind of ambiguity is sometimes called semantic ambiguity. So we talked about grouping ambiguity, and it turns out grouping ambiguity is a type of semantic ambiguity. When there are different ways to read a sentence when the confusion is because of the order of the words, the syntax, if you will. That's another kind of ambiguity that's sometimes called syntactic or syntactical ambiguity. And that's what's going on in the second one and this one. And also this last one. He chased the girl in the car. There's lots of ways to read this. And, I guess pronouns, they can be ambiguous. But if we set that ambiguity aside and we say, oh, the he refers to, say, Ryan, and the girl refers to, say, whatever, the point to pick a girl in the world, and the car, we specify all these things, then there's still ambiguity, but it does not have to do with any individual word or phrase. It's because of the order of the words. So what are the ways to read this? Well, what are you picturing? Well, one thing that comes to mind is that there's a girl that's driving in a car. She's in a car driving it, and there's this guy, chasing after her. So, I call this the romantic interpretation, because I'm thinking of like a rom-com, and he realizes he's in love with her, and she's driving away kind of forever, and he's like, no, I need to tell her that I love her, right? And he's running after, it's kind of like running versus car, he's running as fast as he can, and maybe he can catch up. So that's the romantic interpretation. Then there's like the psychopath interpretation. And so what could this mean? He chased the girl in the car. Maybe just like she had the glasses, maybe he's got the car. So maybe he's in the car and he's like, and she's on foot. And he's like, I'm gonna get her, I'm gonna kill her or something. And it's a sociopath. That's another reading. Another one is the I don't know what we could call this. The the limo going to prom interpretation. So I'm thinking of like a big stretch limo, maybe one of those stretch Hummers, got a bunch of people in it. And maybe a guy and his date to the prom are kind of chasing each other inside, for fun, playfully inside a stretch limo. So he chased the girl. They're both in the car and they're kind of being playful on the way to prom or something. So that's another interpretation. But it's ambiguous. It's not clear what it means. Now, a lot of times the context, like when you take these sentences out of context, they're ambiguous. But if the context, like if this was in the middle of a passage or in a sentence in a book or an article or something, if the context clears up the ambiguity, then we're good. That's fine. This is a real sign. I took this with my camera, and I love when I come across real life examples of stuff I'm teaching about in this class. So this is an example of that. This is a real sign. I think I was in Colorado, and I saw this. We walked past a bike store, and it was a huge bike sale. And of course, they mean that there's lots of bikes that are on sale. But I interpret this the funny way, like huge bike sale. How huge are these bikes? Right? Huge bike. They're these huge bikes and they're on sale. This is real. I didn't make this up. Crazy baby sale. Like, well, this baby does look kind of crazy. That's why it's on sale. I mean, of course, it's ridiculous. Selling, my God, buying and selling of children. That's what could be more horrible. But yeah. So what they're saying is that there's baby clothing, baby items, stuff that babies need. Those things are on sale, and it's the sale is crazy because look at this. Look at this. Our brain's 70. Oh my gosh, we're gonna have such a good deal. But maybe one thing, or maybe only a small number of things in this giant store are 70% off, and then maybe most things are regular price or only 10% off, and then up to it's right there. What was the reason for the visit? They were unable to eat diarrhea. Commas, use them. So this, so commas, they help with the syntax. They help with the order. So unable, this preposition, eat, diarrhea, none of these words individually are ambiguous. But this whole phrase, if you will, is still ambiguous because of the order. And if you put a comma in here, that affects the order of how you should read this. And we need a comma here. So there's really two symptoms. This person came in for a medical visit or see a doctor's visit because they have a lack of appetite, they're unable to eat, and they also have diarrhea. But if you don't have the comma, it's just this hilarious. They're like, well, probably most of us are unable to eat diarrhea. I mean, oh my gosh, just the thought of it, just gross. So that's ambiguity. Oh, and this is real. How many of you have experienced this? Hey, you want to grab a drink later? I'm in town and would love to catch up. Let me know. Sure. There's different ways to read this, even text messages. Great. I have a meeting from 5 to 6, then we can meet in Madison Square Park. Does that work for you? Okay. If you put a period, if you didn't have this period, you could read it as sure. Right? There's different ways to read sure. And this is why a lot of times people use, you ever notice yourself overusing exclamation points because you want to avoid the reading of this as sure? So it's like, sure, exclamation point. Okay, exclamation point. So they know that you really are interested. Are you angry? No. Really? No. The period seems to change the meaning. Again, it's still ambiguous because they might just be like good grammar. Are you angry? No. If it's true that this is just no, they're not angry. But it almost seems like they are angry with the period. Ending a text message with a period makes you seem like a jerk. Study shows. So this is how people read, and I think this is real. I mean, it's the way I read it. I probably use too many exclamation points in texting because I know how this reads. It's still ambiguous. The thing is, there's still a chance that this person means it genuinely. So that's why there's ambiguity. And just like things can get miscommunicated and lost in translation over text message and over email, same thing in text message. And that's why, even with all our technology, Zoom and FaceTime and phone calls, there's still it's not a full substitute for a face-to-face in-person meeting. Yeah, that's a real thing. I don't know if you remember this movie from 2007, Knocked Up. The whole conflict of the movie, which is these people hook up and then she gets pregnant, she gets knocked up. That's that's the main conflict of the movie. And the cause of the conflict was a miscommunication. There's a miscommunication because they go out. I think she's celebrating a promotion. I think he's just out with his friends. He doesn't really have a job. Seth Rogen playing the lovable loser. And I'm forgetting her name. The Grey's Anatomy person. It'll come to me later. You guys are probably screaming at me like, oh, it's what's her face? Okay. Actually, it's too knocked up. Seth Rogen, or is it cast and crew? Katherine Heigl. Sorry. Katherine Heigl is this character. So they go to the club, they meet, they both drink too much. They go back to, I think, her place. They are fooling around. And then she says something like, do you have a condom? And he's like, of course. And so he's fumbling with his jeans and pulling it out, and he's trying to open it up, and he's taking forever. And then she says, oh, just do it already. And so that sentence, just do it already, at least to him, there were two ways to read that. And the way that he read it is like, oh, let maybe be a little bit irresponsible, or I trust you and I don't want to wait anymore. Let's just go through with it and don't worry about the protection this time. And she meant just do like hurry up and like how hard is it to open this thing? And so yeah, there was an ambiguity, and it led to their lives, course of their lives, completely being changed. Hopefully, still for the better. But yeah, so ambiguity, it is real, and it has real world implications. The word is one of the most basic, but perhaps most pivotal, most important words in our language. It has such an important function. It's very ambiguous. You could say blank is, and this is, I think it's grammatically still correct. It's just it's a funky way to phrase something. So if you said Superman is, what does that mean? Well, he just exists. You're kind of saying Superman exists. Superman. It's like saying I am. She. Yeah, you could say she is, right? You don't see that as much, but it's there. This is one. Superman is strong. The function of is here is not just saying Superman exists. What follows is an adjective, is a word that describes Superman. So we call this the is of predication. Superman is Clark Kent. So now this does describe Superman, but it's more than that. It isn't just like a partial description. It's not just an adjective. It's the is of identity. You're saying that Superman is numerically identical to Clark Kent. These two individuals are one and the same. You're not saying Superman is one and the same as strong. No, that's different. And then here's another is. Superman is a flying red cape superhero from the planet Krypton who has superhuman strength and impervious skin. So this is, it's using it, we're providing a very informative definition. So it's the is of definition. So even the word is ambiguous. All right. So let's remind ourselves of the differences here. A vague expression creates a blur of meaning. An ambiguous expression mixes up otherwise clear meanings. So with ambiguity, you can read it as this or that. And the this or that, the two different meanings or interpretations or way to read something, those are crystal clear. I mean, they can also be vague, but setting aside those cases, it's just the path is split down to these possibilities. There are at least two, but each of these is clear. It's just you don't know, is it this one or that one? That's ambiguity. Vagueness, there's this whole range, comes in degrees. Ambiguity is all or nothing. So this makes me think of strength versus validity. Vagueness is like strength that comes in degrees. And ambiguity is like validity or soundness. It's all or nothing. An argument is sound or it's not. It's valid or it's not. Language is ambiguous or it's not. Vagueness, it's not. It's vague or it's not. I mean, I guess you might have it's not vague. But once you admit to vagueness, I guess you could have an argument that's not strong, it's not vague. But once you are in the domain of vagueness or strength or weakness, there's this range or continuum. All right, we'll do one more thing and then wrap things up for this video. Factual versus verbal disputes. This happens in real life as well. People get in heated debates and arguments, and a lot of times they're just talking past each other because they're not working with the same definitions. That's a verbal dispute. But if they're arguing in a way where one person is saying it's A and another person is saying no, that's factually incorrect, that's a factual dispute. So let's go through some examples and you see what I mean. Sometimes people disagree on the facts. So for instance, a few years ago, it's 2020. The 2020 Olympics are this year. Maybe someone who's a fan of the Olympics, they keep track and it's like, oh, it's every 4 years. It's the same year as the U.S. presidential election. Last one we had 2016. Hard to forget that. So 4 years later, 2020. Okay, we're going to have a presidential election and we're going to have the Olympics. And then someone says, actually, that's factually incorrect. The Olympics are next year. And this was that weird thing because of COVID. They had to postpone the Olympics. They couldn't hold them in the summer of 2020 because COVID was too rampant. So they delayed them until 2021. But they still were it was still the Olympics that followed the 2016 Olympics. And so it still kept and they had there might've been some branding things, and it still was the 2020 Olympics. It just wasn't held that year. This happens. You might not know that Oktoberfest, which has roots in Germany, is not really in October. Believe it or not, most or all of it is in September. So the name doesn't always give you all the information. Okay, so this is a factual dispute because are the Olympics in 2020, the year 2020, or are they not in the year 2020? And they weren't. They were in 2021. Sometimes because of ambiguity, people are just talking past each other. It's just there's an issue with some people might say, oh, it's just semantics. You're using a word in a weird way or in a way different from me. So it's a verbal dispute. And there's an ambiguity. So the reason why we're talking about this right after vagueness and ambiguity is because verbal disputes are always rooted in ambiguity. So let's say I roll up and I say, look, I got a new car. And the person says, no, you didn't. That's a 2015. And it's like, well, new car is ambiguous. These people are they're getting an argument, they have a dispute, but there's different meaning, different semantics of what the phrase or the term new car. What does new car mean? Well, sometimes it means new to me or new to you. That's what the person means. It's like, I didn't get a brand new car, but like I got a different car than the one I had. I got this new car. I'm not saying it's brand new. So that's the ambiguity. Does new car mean brand new, or does it mean new to the owner? And if they could get clear about if the second person understood that new car means new to the owner, then they would no longer have a dispute. The dispute would melt away. So that's what's nice about verbal disputes is without even changing the facts, the dispute can go away. If you need to change the facts, then you got a factual dispute. You don't have a verbal dispute. Here's a dispute, kind of like a believer and a non-believer. Humans were created in the image of God, says person A. Person B, God doesn't exist, so that can't be true. Is that a factual dispute or a verbal one? If you can pause and think about it. This is a factual dispute. They're arguing. Well, I mean, there's a couple things here. When A says humans were created in the image of God, this presumes the existence of God, right? If you are going to be created in the image of something, that something has to exist. You can't be created in the image of nothing. So embedded in this claim is the claim about God's existence. So A claims God exists and B claims God doesn't exist. So they're having a factual dispute. It's not about the definition of God. I mean, you could have different definitions of God, and that could lead to a verbal dispute. But let's presume that they have the same definition of God. This is a factual dispute. Third grader to parent. My teacher keeps telling me to be violent. Parent says, what? Why did you say that? Third grader says, well, she keeps telling me to be silent. My teacher's telling me to be silent. And on TV, there are these people with signs that say silence is violence. So there's a verbal dispute here between the kid and the parent, or the kid and the teacher. There's an ambiguity about violence. So can words, or the lack of speaking up, like silence in this case, can that constitute violence? There's some people who define violence in that way, but there's also an ambiguity with silence. There's like being silent when you're in third grade in the classroom, and then there's being silent in kind of a political sense when you are in the face of an injustice, let's say, kind of inaction or not saying anything. Well, that's a different meaning of silence. So there's the verbal dispute. There's a verbal misunderstanding here. There's a verbal dispute. And once you clear that up, once the teacher can say, oh, when the teacher says be silent, that's different than what these people on TV mean. And so once you clarify that meaning, then the third grade goes, oh, she's not telling me to be violent. She's telling me to be silent. And this silent doesn't equal that silent. All right, let's practice a little bit in 2-1 Roman numeral 4 and 5. So we need to determine if the following disputes are verbal, factual, or some combination. If it's verbal, does it arise from vagueness or ambiguity? So usually all the examples I think we gave so far arose from ambiguity, but sometimes people are talking past each other because the terms they're using are vague. So that can happen too. I think there's an example in this. So let's go through that. Okay, number 1. Again, you have to do all of the highlighted ones. It's on the syllabus. But we're going to do some of your homework for you, just like we always do. Frank says, look at that huge tree that fell last night. It must have made a tremendous crash when it came down. Shirley says, no, I'm afraid you're quite wrong. Sound is a perception, and perceptions depend on a perceiver. Since nobody was around here last night, there was no crash. I think these people are talking past each other. Frank's definition of sound is the one that people have used for a long time. Sound is an experience that we have when we hear something, right? And Shirley's talking not about experiences and more about the objective features of sound, that produces sound waves. Sound is perception and perception. So since nobody was around, there was no crash. She's talking about kind of sound as sound waves. And if there's I'm attributing this to Shirley, and I shouldn't be. Sorry, Shirley's taking the experience meaning of sound. For her, this is how sound is the experience of hearing things. And so when she says that no, there was no sound, she's saying that she says it here. There's no perceivers there. There's no one there to experience it. And since sound can only exist when there are perceivers, there's no crash. So I guess it's not saying sound, they're saying crash. But Frank, he would be okay with crashes existing without the experience of sound, because a crash is more a physical thing. Of course, you might be thinking, oh, this sounds like the old Zen koan, or this comes up in Eastern traditions about if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, doesn't make a sound. So you can see I'm even though I've gone through that and taught about that, and that's exactly at the heart of it here, that there still is a kind of a paradoxical trap there. But the way out of it, I think, is to look at the word crash or the word sound and treat it as semantically ambiguous. There's two ways to read sound or two ways to read crash. There is sound, the subjective experience, what we hear when we hear things. And then there is the physical objective side of sound, which is sound waves. So even if there is no experience, because there's no beings around to hear, presumably there's still sound waves that are being generated by a crash. And so once you clear those meanings up, then the dispute should go away. So this, I would say, is a verbal dispute based on ambiguity. Does sound mean the subjective perception or objective disturbance of the air, or, other things bumping into each other? Okay. 3, Phil, that was a great basketball game last night. Steph Curry scored 37 points. Arthur says, no, Curry only scored 34. This is a factual dispute. Did he score 37 or 34? They have the same they understand the same thing of scored and points and what these numbers mean. They're disagreeing about the facts. It's a factual. Let's do 9. Cheryl says, tomorrow I'm going to the Metallica concert. Their music is fabulous. Oliver, you call that music? Really, it's just noise. Incredibly loud noise at that. So this is a mix of both. So there is a verbal dispute about music. And Metallica, is it music or noise? So is noise music? That's one way to put it. And there's also a factual dispute about whether or not, okay, so if you believe that you can analyze music objectively, and you could say that, a Mozart symphony is music, and like I can hear my refrigerator humming, that's not music. And so you might just go pure subjective and say it's just in the eye of the listener. That's fine. But some people say, well, it's less relative than that. There's something more objective. There's like what's pleasant sounding to human beings or something. So there is a bit of a factual matter to what's music and what's not. And they are having that factual debate. So that's going on here. But there's also a verbal debate about what's noise and what's music. So it depends on how you define music. And so that's the subjective part. So you can, if you define music and noise objectively, there's a disagreement there. And then same thing verbally, those definitions can also, they could be talking past each other. So like I said, it's a combination of a verbal, it's kind of vagueness here. Factual, what does music mean? Also, Cheryl claims that Metallica makes good sounds, where Oliver claims that it does not. All right, let's do one more. Eric and Leah. Eric, I've just signed up for Philosophy 502, Dr. Peterson's class in metaphysics. I know I'm going to enjoy it because I've always been fascinated by magic and ghosts. And Leah says, I'm afraid you're in for a surprise. So as we learned in another video, the first video for this course, in philosophy, metaphysics has a bit of an unusual meaning. The common everyday meaning of metaphysics is like the study of magic and ghosts and ESP and things that are supernatural. But in philosophy, it's the philosophical study of reality. And so there is a verbal dispute about what metaphysics is. Is metaphysics the ESP magic stuff, or is it a rigorous study of reality? It's metaphysics. Study of ghosts, Welly is saying the proper sense, the branch of philosophy deals with ultimate questions of existence, reality, being, ontology. All right. And then finally, 215. We'll end here. So you get to generate something here. Create the following disputes: a factual dispute focusing on the date of some historical event. Well, we already did that. Well, this was a verbal dispute. So so this example actually doesn't. No, this was. No, I take it back. Yeah, this was a factual dispute on the date of some historical event. When were the 2020 Olympics? You say 2020. I say, no, they're 2021. That's a factual dispute. And that was an historical event. There you go. So this works. I apologize. All right. That's all I have for you. Thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you next time.